Hey Farah. Firstly, thanks for coming on the show. Now, first of all, tell us about your name, because in your podcast, you often like to start by delving into the meaning of your guest's name.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of going to flip that back to you. I read that you were named after one of the Charlie's Angels.
That's right. Yeah, I was named after Farah Fawcett, who was one of the original Charlie's Angels. And I think my mum, she's a very typical Mother Goose kind of character. She's not into adrenaline at all, but somehow she lived, vicariously through Charlie's Angels. And we always joke with her that she really got that because I obviously love adrenaline, speed, living on the edge. When she gets in my car, she's always hanging on. So yeah, I mean, that's who I was named. And my name means happiness as well. So I love that because I feel like part of my job as an artist is to make people feel happy, obviously, through music. So.
And your artist name is Ninja.
Yeah.
And your surname is Nanja?
N1NJA, yeah.
Nanja. And so I guess there's some link there as well, because I read also that you, from an early age, you have an interest in the ancient art of the warrior. Tell us a little bit more about that interest and kind of what rabbit holes it found you go down.
For sure. So because my surname's N1NJA, ever since I was a kid, people would always call me Ninja, just as a, play around with the letters in my surname. But naturally, I obviously loved Teenage Mutant, Turtle Ninjas, right? So I, as a kid, I obviously loved all of that stuff. And I just kind of started really loving the whole vibe of ninjas, the point that they're always in stealth, they move in stealth, they don't, you cannot predict what they're about to do. They have so many tricks up their sleeve, and it's kind of oh, that was a ninja move, right? And that kind of really started to play into my whole life because I was always the underdog. I did always feel quite misunderstood in school, and then suddenly a ninja move would happen and people oh, didn't see that coming, right? And so I just felt when I was looking for my artist name many years ago, decades ago now, honestly, it just felt so natural to kind of use that and also, kind of tie it with the philosophy of the underground, of electronic music, and also approach the industry with that mindset of a warrior, because you do need that to succeed. It's such a tough industry. So the more laser focused you can be, the more that you can move at high speed, low drag kind of thing. I feel that's what will hopefully help you be successful. So for me, it was a natural fit to kind of go into that as an artist name and have fun with it.
And for those listeners, viewers who maybe aren't familiar with you, I mean, you are someone who is very driven and you're spinning lots of plates simultaneously. You're very heavily invested in the electronic music industry, and I guess first and foremost, that's why we're talking to you. You're a DJ, you're an artist. As you said in the introduction, you've just launched a label. Congratulations, we'll talk about that later. But you're also doing so many other things. I think your normal 9 to 5 is working for the IMS, the International Music Summit. Yeah. You are a journalist. You've done a TEDx talk. I mean, the list is exhaustive. I mean, first of all, where do you find the time and the energy, and do you ever go to sleep?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Obviously, these hats, they weren't all just there from the beginning. In the beginning, I actually was a DJ first. Then I went to a business school, and when I was at university, I had a long time to kind of already hone my DJ career being in London. I had the opportunity to train as a journalist straight after uni, and I really wanted to take that up because I've always been passionate about making change in the industry, and I felt like that internship would teach me a lot about how to write, how to reach, create the interesting pitches and all of these different things, which it did. But, in the music industry, as you know, we all do wear a lot of hats, and I think these are just some of the ones that I'm proud to wear, and I'm really passionate too. And obviously a lot of those skills, especially the journalism stuff, I had no idea it would later lead to being a curator at IMS. The funny thing is, my first ever interview as a music journalist in Ibiza when I was doing this internship was with Pete Tong. I could never have guessed 10 years later that I would then, he would be my boss, right? So, but obviously, like the skills of like learning that 10 years prior, you know, kind of naturally led to a point where, you know, I got asked to join the team through obviously my work in showcasing and kind of similar to you, like doing podcasting and really creating my own space where I can showcase what I'm passionate about and the walls that you want to tear down. And to touch on your point about the energy, I do sleep. Um, I definitely need, you know, a good recharge, as we all do. I think, you know, I'm very conscious that obviously I'm a woman and, you know, I'm in my mid-30s and I don't have children at this point in my life, which is something I do want. And I just feel that when that happens, there is going to be a chords that you're going to have to maybe shorten a little bit, as I'm sure you'll relate being a father. So right now that energy is there because I don't have that huge responsibility, right? But I can tell you that, you know, the energy is not the same as what it was in my 20s. Like, I'm sure you'll probably relate. Definitely not doing the after parties, you know, I mean, it's going out 3 or 4 times a month. It could have been that in a week, you know, in your 20s.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, when I do, I definitely feel it afterwards.
yeah,
So I can tell you
exactly.
that I'm in my 40s. Let's go back to like electronic music and how you first got into it. I mean, what came first? Was it the DJing or was it as a producer? And, you know, was it a kind of a moment, you know, an event, a DJ, a track that first kind of got you into it?
Yeah, I think, you know, probably similar, you know, to you. We grew up in the 90s. The internet was just like coming out. So suddenly there was like this explosion of like discovery of the world. My dad always used to listen to house music on our drives to school. So I always, and at that time, you know, it was the radio. So you'd always know that on the drive home, certain songs were going to be played and they would just make you feel great, like especially after a hard day at school. But then the internet came out and yeah, the first club I snuck into was Fabric, age 15. I had, you know, been collecting now like quite a few records, but I heard it on a real sound system and it changed my life. And I never looked back, and I went into this deep, like dark rabbit hole of the electronic music industry. And yeah, we're decades in.
And you've played at some fantastic venues, Ibiza, Pasha, I think Miami Space, the Nairobi Earth Festival.
Earth Dance, so yeah.
You hit a few milestones last week. I mean, do you want to tell us about that?
Sure, yeah. Last week was a milestone week for sure. I made my debut on Her. Probably not saying that correctly, but yeah, on Her in Berlin. Obviously, that's like quite a big achievement for an artist. The next day launched my record label, Tales of Twilight, and then I played at Ritter closing for Cassius. So it was, yeah, it's probably why I sound a little bit under the weather right now. It was a big week.
I've always wondered about that Her room.
Yeah.
Is it like literally the size of a bathroom?
It's like the size of the studio we're in right now, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, but it's the size of a bathroom, yeah. And it's bathroom tiles, and it's, yeah.
And on your journey to, you know, from the beginning to where we are now as an artist, as a DJ, you know, can you talk a little bit about some of the maybe challenges you faced? Because I did read, and you alluded to it a minute ago, that, you know, you have faced some sexism, maybe some discrimination in the industry. Are you able to kind of talk a little bit about that, or?
Yeah, of course. Look, I think that anyone operating in the music industry by default, whatever gender, race, anything they are, it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world, right? It's just not, because if, let's say I'm going to speak now from the artist lens, but if you're being an artist, you are putting yourself out there to be judged every single time you step into the booth or you post a piece of content, because that's just the way humans are. Like, that's what we do, right? We all have our opinions, and then obviously, you know, the keyboard warriors come out. Now, I haven't had that kind of level or anything of that. I think the barriers I face is like, if you just literally look at the stats, I mean, 6% of females producers are female, right? 22% of the DJs in Ibiza are female, right? I don't even know what the stat is about label owners who are female, right? It's just the odds are stacked against you. And I think the difficulties I faced has been there's internal and there's external. So internally, like I've had this motor coordination delay called dyspraxia, which I'm sure you're probably going to touch upon, but you know, I sort of faced a lot of imposter syndrome from that, because with dyspraxia, it means that you have a delayed your brain sends a delayed signal to the rest of your body, and things like sequencing, coordination are just more difficult, right? And obviously, music is a very coordinated experience, right? So for a long time in my head, I just didn't even. I didn't even like want to acknowledge this thing, because I just felt like I didn't want to even face that it could maybe not be a reality for me, like just by default of this. But obviously, like I've worked really hard on all of that. And I think what that has taught me is that actually it's your superpower, because you know, when you have a learning coordination or a learning difficulty, you kind of do look at the world a bit differently. You just think differently. And all of the pressures you've had to face. I'm also introverted, so many things that you've had to learn to like represent yourself in a way. You've kind of had to tear those barriers down if you want to be doing this, right? So there's been that internal, and then obviously externally, you know, I mean, I think you know, I've been tested in probably all the ways that you can be tested. But, you know, I very much, I'm a value-driven person. So I'm so conscious of my North Star and my values that in the end, I just kind of detach. It's like, if it's not worth it, if values are going to get compromised, you know, or it's not worth it to be with a certain promoter or collective if they can't respect you because, you know, I think because maybe you are a woman, they can't take sometimes the leadership style, or they just can't accept, you know, that's the situation. And so, but there's 8 billion people in the world, so you just move on. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And talking about you having dyspraxia, I mean, you did a TEDx talk about that a few years ago, where you talked very candidly, very articulately about it. How did that come about? I'm really interested. And I do urge viewers, listeners
Sure.
to watch it. It's only 20 minutes, and you know it is a really interesting watch.
So the question is, how did that opportunity come about? Yeah, it was a crazy one. I literally got a WhatsApp from this person I met in Luxembourg. I happened to be in Luxembourg DJing for the Luxembourg Space Agency. And she happened to be there because she was like the Minister of Education. And this was like in partnership with Vodafone. And we just like exchanged numbers, and she'd started following my journey on LinkedIn. And yeah, she sent me a WhatsApp being like, we're curating TEDx in Luxembourg. It's at the Philharmonic Hall. The theme is like explore, excite, and something else. And we just feel like you would be a great fit. Would you be interested in doing it? And I thought it was a joke, because I just thought, like, to get a TED Talk invite, surely it's going to be quite formal. There's going to be like an email with like, do you know what I mean? But it was just so casual. It was just like this WhatsApp. And so at first I really didn't believe it. But then like, obviously, like it started all coming together, and she sent me the email and whatever. But the caveat was that I had only 6 weeks to put this talk together. And they were quite kind of like, they weren't like, this is what you're going to talk about. They were like, you've got to obviously come up with the idea. And the other way of doing a TED Talk is that you apply, right? And when you apply, you have to give one sentence, and it's your golden idea that it's worth spreading. So when you apply, you've already gone in with an idea of what you want to talk about, whereas this was the other way around, right? So in those 6 weeks, I was also in 6 different continents. I had huge events I was like organizing for some of my work. And, you know, I just, it was a very like difficult period to think, what is it I'm going to speak about? And to be honest, up until that point, I hadn't even looked back about my diagnosis about dyspraxia. I just had shut it down. I'd compartmentalized it. I'd worked really hard to like overcome it, but I'd not acknowledged what it meant really. And when I was in Dubai, I was at the Autodrome, and I was racing a Formula 3 car. And on my way back in the plane, I still was freaking out, because I was like halfway into this 6 weeks now, and I hadn't thought, like, there's so much you want to talk about, right? I look at this picture and while I'm on the plane, just like looking at the experience in Dubai, and behind the Formula 3 car, and like, you know, I had this helmet on, there was a sign that said hashtag don't crack under pressure. And you might recognize that because it's the tagline that Tag Heuer, the watch company, uses. And I realized then that that was what I wanted to talk about, because if you look at that person under the helmet, you don't know anything. You don't know if they're a boy or girl or, you know, a transgender person. You have no idea their ethnicity. You don't have any idea what they're going through. But I knew under that helmet, for me to do all of what I had just done, like race a Formula 3 car with motor coordination delays, that I was going to talk about now, like that, and like how I'd rewired my brain, because my educational psychologist had told me at the time that that's what I'd done. And yeah, that's what I talked about. So yeah, it was a very pressuring moment. And obviously, because it was in the Philharmonic Hall in Luxembourg, I wanted to put this all into context. And so I wanted to perform a musical piece with it. But it also meant they're very strict on the TED stage. It's 18 minutes, that's it. Like, there's no plus or minus. They let me do 20 minutes, but it still meant that my talk was not 18, and my talk was 15 minutes, and the performance was 5 or 4, something, whatever that is. Yeah.
And you had no script. That's what I was impressed about.
Yeah, you can't on the TED talk. You're not allowed to have it. There's nothing. You cannot have even a presentation, like nothing.
So is that something that came naturally to you, or did you spend a lot of time rehearsing?
So again, like some of the stats is like a TED speaker spends 1 hour practicing 1 minute of their speech. So imagine, right, if it's 18 minutes, that's 18 hours practicing these 18 minutes, right? I didn't have that luxury. The talk, it obviously I started writing a lot. It was way over time, and then it was like refining, getting better. And the last 48 hours was the crucial like crunch. But I didn't sleep the night before the talk. It was impossible.
I'm sure.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your role in the IMS, the International Music Summit.
Sure.
Can you tell me a bit more about that role, and what are the objectives? What's the ethos behind the IMS?
Sure. So I'll start with the ethos first. IMS was started over 17 years ago, notably by 5 people in the industry, and they're all very key in what they do. Most famously, one of them is Pete Tong. Then we have Ben Turner, who manages Richie Hawtin since day one. He manages Sam Abdul Hadi. He's been a prolific journalist in his time. Then we have Danny Whittle, who was one of the key programmers at Pasha in the golden years, and he owns Club Chinois. And a couple of other co-founders as well. And they started IMS to basically give the island a voice, Ibiza a voice, as electronic music was becoming commercial. Because obviously the Ibiza 30 years ago was very different to the Ibiza today. And they felt that it was very important that the island would have a voice in shaping this culture. So obviously when it started, probably like 50 people, you know, coming into the first IMS. And now, fast forward, you know, 2 decades later, it's over 1,500 delegates, 70 to 100 different sessions. And the ethos, I believe, has remained quite true to some key value pillars that we explore, which is around education, wellness. We have a huge focus on wellness specifically. Next generation, technology, business. And it's a time where the entire ecosystem of the industry, labels, managers, promoters, agents, artists, lawyers, publishers, the entire ecosystem is there. And they are talking about these topics, about what's going on.
And so your job is to curate these artists? Yeah, do you have free reign on that? And how do you start? I mean, or are you given some kind of brief?
Yeah, so my job is the curational manager. So actually it's not more about the lineup, but it's more about the actual panels. So we have 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and my job is to basically, with my boss and with like Ben Turner, is to kind of start by thinking what is the overall theme, first of all, of the conference, because that sets the agenda. So in the past, we've had things like Face the Future, In Pursuit of Purpose, and intergenerational exchange. So the theme has to be exciting, but broad enough that it can obviously apply to different things. And then start like identifying, start thinking about the types of panels or types of sessions that we want to have. titling them, starting to create the brief, and then also starting to think who would be the right speakers for these types of topics. And yeah, and of course, because of the Doubt Villa show, we do involve some of the artists to talk as well. So there's a crossover slightly with that, but yeah, it's a big role. As you say, it's my 9 to 5, but it's really from September till May, because that's when we're planning for the Ibiza edition. And yeah, the company got bought by Beatport a few years ago, so there's also that. And we now have, IMS has had global editions in the past, in LA, in Tokyo, in Asia. And yeah, in the last couple of years, you would have seen, we've been to South Africa, Mexico. In fact, yesterday there was a LA IMS, I think, going on as well. So yeah, lots of different things going on.
And you mentioned Pete Tong is obviously one of the key figures. Do you have a close relationship with him? What's he like as a boss?
Yeah, no, I don't have like the closest relationship with him. I'm sure you can imagine he's doing 100 other things. But he's a really nice guy. He's very down to earth. He's really passionate about change in the industry. And you can really, I think that shows through the programming, and he's really quite passionate as well about the wellness side and protecting. I'm sure he's seen it all, been there, done it, lived through this relentless tour cycle, and I think that even last year we heard him talk a little bit about what that meant for him and everything. So yeah, he's a lovely guy.
And you mentioned earlier you're also a podcaster. You run a successful podcast called Mission Makers.
Yeah.
Which you have had numerous electronic music artists on. You've had Cal Cox on, Julia Karma, Lee Burridge, but it's not predominant. It's not just electronic music podcasts. You've had people like Deepak Chopra on. You've had people within the Formula One industry because you're a big fan. How did that come about, and what was the rationale behind it?
So the show's concept was kind of born, but just before the pandemic. And then I found myself, I just actually broken my elbow in Davos, and I was there because I was DJing during the World Economic Forum, and for context, like the World Economic Forum is a place where all the world leaders travel to in January, and they set the global agenda apparently for the year coming. So I was in this crazy place, and I was invited to DJ, but also run a couple of talks. And I suddenly had broken my elbow, and I was in hospital, and I started just thinking about how on earth did I even get to Davos? This is crazy. And that term, mission maker, it was coined there for me because I started thinking about the people I was surrounded by, literally the Deepak Chopras, the Donald Trumps, literally. And yeah, I thought, what, I think it'll be so interesting to talk about not only what, of course, does it take to be successful, but actually on a much deeper level, what are the misconceptions? What is the spirituality behind success? Because you look at all those people and you look at the world, obviously, and you've got some very smart people running the world, but it's so messed up, all the horrific crimes against humanity. So what is missing in this pursuit, this relentless pursuit of success that everyone is so driven to? And can we kind of come back to, understanding our responsibility, right? And not all episodes talk about that, but that generally my style as an interviewer is to kind of just dig deeper into that. So the show is about the mindset, misconceptions, and spirituality behind success. And just because of what I do with my life, being in music, being in motorsport, and sometimes in business, I thought it would just be much easier for me to create one show because I would rather do that than have 3 different brands. It would just not make sense. And what I've come to realize over time is there is actually a lot of people that I've interviewed that have this, that are really into Formula One and are really into music, or vice versa. So I kind of created this little canvas of a space where, for example, we had Jaime Alguersuari. He was a former Red Bull Formula One driver, and then he became a DJ. And, he's with Loic Le Jolif, who runs like Brunch Electronic. You know, they're doing amazing things in the industry. So it's kind of just talking about, you know, these kinds of things.
Pole position.
Pole position, that's it.
I
Yeah,
listened to it.
exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah, exactly. So that's Mission Makers. We're 5 years in now. Yeah.
And obviously, I think listeners, viewers will get the sense that you're a very driven person, and you're talking to people who are very driven, very successful in the field.
Yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot now, but what's some of the best advice that you have been given by guests that you've then took away and maybe applied to your own life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, it like comes to values, like not being afraid to walk away from things if things just don't feel value aligned. I think that's honestly the most important piece of advice, because even if somebody is who they are and whatever doors they can open, at the end of the day, like, you don't want to get trapped in something that you feel uncomfortable in. And I think that it always comes down to like listening to your intuition. Like, everybody talks about that, but it's true. And I think that's one of the best. And also that you have to create your own success. You cannot wait for it to fall on your lap. Like, if you want something, if it's not happening, you've got to go and tear down the walls and, you know, make it happen for yourself, because nobody's going to hand it to you. Like, no one is going to do that. You've got to build it step by step.
I'll tell you some of the best advice that I gleaned from one of your podcasts, Carl Cox.
Yeah.
And you might remember this. He described being in maybe a green room with some other top artists, and he said they were all bemoaning that their track wasn't
number one. Yeah.
And he was like, God, man, just step back, take a look at yourself.
Totally.
You are so successful, you know, done so many good things, and you should be happy with that. You know, and stop kind of comparing yourself to other people. And I thought that was really fantastic advice.
100%.
Top guy. Now, I read you were dubbed by a Channel 4 journalist as, and this name was, I think, made up for you, an entrepreneur. Because they describe, it's talking about your also passion for Formula One.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about where that passion came from? And I know that you also have like roles within the Formula One industry. Could you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, sure. So like the passion for motorsport, it sort of came around the same time as music, like very young, like 7 years old. And both stemmed from being bullied at school and finding these two outlets to escape all of that. So obviously with music, it was like playing an instrument, specifically the Spanish guitar. And then with motorsport, which is much more, let's say, inaccessible, but it was like, I just went to this person's birthday party once, and it was a go-karting thing. And like, actually up till that point, I do like remember that my grandfather had like watched F1. We would watch it together, and we would go for like long drives on a Sunday. But that didn't feel like, obviously you're not driving, so it doesn't, you know, you can appreciate it, but you're not, and you're a kid, so obviously it's just like an adventure. But when I got into the go-kart, I mean, it was like another out of mind body dimension. Never felt anything like it in my life. The adrenaline, the rush, like it was just incredible. And it was like from that moment that I started asking my mom, you know, like, can I, you know, I want to come back. It's a really expensive sport. So, you know, it wasn't something that was like, you know, like that easy, or, you know, I mean, really the facts are like a single season in like Formula 3, you know, is like €500,000. So really it's not something that most people can ever dream to like even compete in. But I was doing karting, and I was doing it on like a national level. And then, you know, I tested a little bit of Formula 3, and then I got this diagnosis for dyspraxia. So then I was like, okay, it's obviously not going to happen. But then like I did everything to kind of like just be able to stay on the track. And the business school that I went to, I basically started this racing society over there, and I had no idea that it would become like what it is now, which is basically like a private motorsports club. And our whole ethos is to explore how Formula One can impact leadership. Because the business school that I went to, we have the most amount of founders out of any university in Britain. So our students and our alumni are really entrepreneurial. They're also 90% from a different part of the world. So we have a very global, university. And so most of them, when they came here, they didn't know, they don't know Motorsports Valley. They don't know this triangle of all the amazing places that exist outside of London for racing. Like half the Formula One teams are based here. And because I'd had this initial kind of experience into motorsports, I had contacts with like McLaren and like different manufacturers to put on events. And then suddenly this whole society became like a movement, and it just took off. So I run it very lightly today because I had to choose. So we'll do like 3 or 4 events a year. But the community is very tight-knit and very connected.
Okay. Let's talk about your role as a producer, and we are here now in your studio. I mean, what does your process look like? And, how does your cultural background shape the music that you make?
Yeah, for sure. It's, it's been a long one. Started producing in 2014, so just over 10 years now. I think, it all starts with an idea, right? It all starts with inspiration. It all starts with time, which is definitely, I'm not in the studio every day. Like I used to be full-time as an artist at one point in my life. And I actually think back to that freedom I had of time. And I think it was too much. Like when I had all the time in the world to be in the studio every day, I wouldn't even create anything amazing. But when I'm now in my life where these moments are 2 or 3 times in a month where I can be sitting down and making music, I'm like getting there fast, right? And so my process, it always begins with the groove. Obviously like nice kick drum, but really a bass line that's like anchoring, creating that nice groove. And then a lot of experimentation. I mean, no process is the same, obviously, but you want to try and find like a nice synth that really starts to work. You now obviously doing this for so long, you know where to spend your time, like moving in one direction or not. Also, I do go back into my previous records and try and resample myself. So try to create something from other things I might have had, whether that's like guitar textures, percussion, like different things. And then my cultural background, yes, I am quite inspired, obviously, by my roots, which are India, East Africa, and Pakistan. So, a lot of the time you might hear, some beautiful Indian instruments which are played by people that I've sought out and like dug deep to find like the people that have been trained by the greatest in India, either tabla or flute or whatever it is. Normally I'll give them a good sketch. So the arrangement is there, like, the maybe 60 to 70% of the idea is already there. And then I obviously want them to create like an extra amazing thing, and then percussion as well. And these days having a lot of fun going into lyrics, working with vocalists and that kind of stuff.
And you've just released a track called Alpine Air.
Yeah.
And I read that some of the sounds in that were from field recordings from snowmobiles. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so this was the debut track on my label. So I wanted it to be very reflective of where I see this label going, which is like on basically my creative canvas to put together these loves of motorsport, of speed and music. So on the label, one of our like ethoses is to kind of try and sample the sounds of speed, and that can mean in various forms. So I do love skiing. So for me, like it was trying to sample the sounds of the skis, trying to sample the sounds of the snowmobile, and like start to come up with like interesting textures from that. And so that's what we did. We basically created, like high percussion out of the skis, and with the snowmobile, like used it as textures for like some of the rolling bass and stuff, layered obviously with other things. And so that's Alpine Air. I feel like it's a record, because one of the values of the label is like to try and create timeless music. And I feel like Alpine Air is like hopefully one of those records where I feel like it cannot be associated with a specific time. It's just like, it should just be played, like hopefully it'll stand the test of time. And obviously it's like it's got the whole thing with nature and like respecting nature and, you know, all that stuff. So, and, you know, Tales of Twilight, as just the name indicates, it's a very storytelling, very enchanting, you know, it's kind of music you want to hear at sunset, you know, like very ethereal, very emotive. And that's the music, really.
And what can we expect from the label in the future? How far down the line have you kind of planned things in terms of releases? And
I'm definitely a planner, and I will be releasing on other labels as well. So I think we will be releasing something once every quarter. We are in second gear now. Like the release for the next one has already been written. It's now about finding the remixer, creating a breathwork version that I do for all the releases. So yeah, like, I mean, I have a lot of music, so it's kind of thinking whether some of it works for Tales of Twilight or it goes somewhere else. And just like looking at this deck of cards and just like seeing where should it go, you know? Yeah.
obviously you're a very busy person, but where do you go to, or what do you do to relax? I mean, I see that you seem to really like to go to the mountains.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time in the Alps. Is that kind of your happy place?
Yeah, I love the mountains. I feel like there's an energy in mountains that's supercharged, and I just like seek it out, you know, as a treat, you know, to just, because I'm a very like, it's either 1,000 miles or it's zero, right? And so you cannot be at, you know, you need to have a yin and yang. So yeah, so I do go to the mountains a lot. I meditate. I do I'm very into that whole wellness world. You know, I love going to the sauna, steam room, swimming, and just hiking a lot. You know, nature is so important.
Have you ever kind of felt burnt out, you know, in terms of creativity?
Yeah, it's an important question because obviously the demands are so high these days, and I think it's natural for me to be, you know, this high energy, like have this energy, right? But what's not natural is like, let's say, the pressures of social media, all of those things, right? That we all, unfortunately, are facing right now. And I think that's sometimes where this energy block comes, because you almost don't want to deal with it, right? I think. So yeah, I haven't burnt out. I've been consciously aware of, like, you know, of this topic. We talk about it a lot, IMS as well. So I feel like I haven't reached that point, thank God, yet. But I think that, you know, again, my life sometimes is like, there are periods where it's just crazy, right? And it's like not much sleep is happening. And so I really believe that the most important thing is two things. Number one, like routine and discipline. In the end, you're probably not going to hit like 100% of your routine, you know, even like all the supplements you take, whatever. But even if you're getting above 60, 70%, you're just giving yourself, your body, that chance to, you know, to just anchor itself. And secondly, in some of these times, like, I don't feel bad to take time off, you know, at the end of the day. Like, it's just like, that's what your body needs, and you need to plan for that. So like, for example, after IMS, of course, I'm not going to be back in the game for like at least a week. You know, the things leading up to that have been so intense that we're operating at 200% of our capacity. So you can't, you know, I go on a digital detox. I go off to the north in Ibiza and I switch off. So yeah, that's just been some of my, like, and the hiking and all that, you know, we talked about. But yeah, I think it's really important you understand how you switch off, and you need to do that without the screen as well, because that is so important. Like, I do remember once I did this wellness experience for someone where we like walked around Regent's Park and we did 3 laps. And the first lap, we were talking with each other. We had some questions. The second lap was in silence. And the third lap, we talked to each other. And I remember I had this friend, and she was like, after the second lap, she didn't know how to be with her own mind, even just in that 10 minutes of just walking, but alone and being next to each other. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, there are genuinely people who cannot even not look at something for even 10 minutes. And you don't want to be in that trap. So, yeah.
You may have answered this in that question that I just asked you, but if you were to go back now to your younger self
Yeah.
and offer some advice,
Yeah.
looking back on the journey that you've been on, what would it be?
Yeah, that's always a great question. I think like when I was in my 20s, I think what maybe I really would have focused on like was getting to be a damn good producer, like just owning and honing my craft, because the demand or the appetite for success, especially when you're young, is so immediate, it's so urgent. But like life is a marathon, right? So we're still here, like we're still out, we're like, you know, nothing, do you know what I mean? Like we still have so much to do, and you need to build that foundation. So in a way, like even like don't rush, like really like take your time, be intentional with what you're creating, why you're doing it. And obviously like network, like there's no tomorrow. You need to network. Like it's all about networking in this game, and it's all about hustling. I like saw a video of Vivi from Blondish the other day, like saying that like this season is nothing, this has all been a huge hustle, and that's Blondish, you know, they're at that level. If somebody at that level is saying it's still a hustle, man, like you got to realize the hustle is like, it never ends. So you've got to do it. You've got to embrace that and take it on the chin. So if you
100%.
want
And it can be exhausting, can't it?
of course, yeah, it is exhausting. Yeah. And especially like, you know, I mean, I don't know if we have time to talk about this, but you being a father, I mean, like, how do you feel about that? You know, like, what are your experiences of being in the music industry and being a parent and having that pressure on you as well?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it is the challenge. I think I'm somebody who's very good at managing my time, but I have a 9 to 5, I'm a teacher. So, you know, you do have to think very carefully about how much attention I give to like the podcast.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. I've found very quickly that networking is the key, you know. All these guests that I've had on the podcast, and I feel really lucky. You know, it's through networking, word of mouth, and, you know, sitting here meeting you because we first met when I did that live podcast. So yeah, it does take up a lot of time. My wife, thankfully, for the most part, she is quite accommodating. Although occasionally she's like, "What, you going to London again?" But yeah, no, it is. It is. You just got to try and make time for everyone, including yourself, I think. So yeah, and I'm still learning as we go as well. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you. It's been an incredibly interesting and insightful conversation. Just give us a sense of, you've talked about your label and what's coming with your label. What about the rest of all your projects? What have you got stuff on the burner ready? Can we tell us about?
Sure. So ADE is coming up. So that's you know, that's pretty imminent. Actually, I'm in Ibiza next week. Got gigs at Pikes and Akasha. And then it's ADE. So October's always quite intense, to be honest. Already obviously quite deep into the whole curation for IMS next year, so that's quite a big part of my focus right now. Working, as I say, on the second release for the label, got a record out on Get Physical in December, so I'm quite happy about that because that's like an amazing label, and that's my first release with Get Physical as well. And it's with this amazing South African singer called Nana Atta, so I'm really happy for this to kindly come out in the world. And yeah, and then I'll be in the mountains doing the ski stuff, you know, January, February. And then it's IMS, you know, pretty soon after that. So, and some point in between there, the next track for the label will come out, and the podcasts are ticking along. There'll be a few interviews coming out soon as well with, we've had Igor from Akasha. He's one of the next guests on the show, Zakes Bantwini, and Ralph Coleman from Mobley to talk about 20 years of Mobley Records. And yeah, just cooking up other music with other cool, you know, vocalists and that kind of stuff.
Definitely got lots to keep you busy then.
Few plates to spin.
And finally, for those listeners, viewers who maybe aren't following you at the moment and after this podcast would like to kind of know more about you and keep up with what you're up to, can you tell us about how to follow you on the socials, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I'm mainly on Instagram or LinkedIn if you wish to connect on LinkedIn. But yeah, mainly Instagram. So it's at dj.n1NJA. That's ninja with a 1 basically. And then Spotify, Ninja with a 1 as my artist. And then the podcast is Mission Makers, and that's everywhere. And yeah, the label's Tales of Twilight on Instagram as well. So that's where you can find me.
Yeah, and we will, of course, post all these links to accompany this podcast as well.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking up the time to chat to us, Ninja.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's been great.
Okay. No,
Hour flew by.
Thank you. And yeah, look forward to seeing, what you got in store in the future.
100%.
Yeah, I'll be following very closely. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.